With the NFL draft fast approaching, talent discussions are everywhere, but in fantasy football, landing spots, they can make or break a rookie's value. I'm Bob Harris. This is the Audible YouTube channel. It's time to go on the hot seat. But first, footballguys.com. That's your website. Appreciate you joining me here every Tuesday. Hit the subscribe button, the notification bell. If you haven't already, like us, unlike us, comment, share, do all the YouTube stuff that we love. And and I know that all, sounds like a lot going on, but we got some really fine content to give you. So that bold proclamation sets the table for the guests because it's not really that bold, because we have Matt Waldman on the hot seat, author of the Rookie Scouting Portfolio. You can find him on the Twitter device at Matt Waldman. Also Blue Sky, he's there. And MattWaldman.com is where you can go buy your Rookie Scouting Portfolio. It's the 20th edition. Matt, tell the uninitiated what they might find when they get this thing.
Sure. In its 20th season, the RSP is really like a football scouting guide in the first half of the RSP, which is the pre-draft, available April 1st. And it gives you scouting reports of 165 prospects at quarterback, running back, wide receiver, tight end. It's football approved in the sense that I would say that according to recruiters like Alex Brown at Ole Miss, that it's one of the two most looked at publications for scouts and NFL decision makers when they use it as a cross-checking device, available to the public. And then post-draft, you get cheat sheets and strategies and rooted in ADP and in different types of formulas and looks that I provide for rankings for your rookie drafts. And all of this is available at mattwaldman.com. This is obviously I've been writing about fantasy football since 2003. So, I'm going to keep fantasy people in mind and provide very fantasy specific data, but I'm going to root it in scouting techniques that have allowed me to be able to do work with quarterback coaches in the NFL, or at least with NFL players, and, and be a widely read publication outside of the fantasy sphere. So you get some long-term evergreen value out of a lot of those players that you're looking at pre-draft when you're combing your waiver wires, and people on national broadcasts are going, "Who is this guy? I've never even heard of him." You'll have heard of him a week before and pick him up on your waiver wire.
Right. I refer back multiple years to, find out about players that are suddenly rising up that maybe I overlooked or didn't pay enough attention to, or a lot of times just to see, like, when somebody has risen up, what Matt thought about them before they became prominent. And it's always very interesting exercise to kind of go back and recheck Matt's work, which is invariably proven to be very good for me, helps my dynasty leagues, etc. And this is the 20th year of reading one, and it seems like only yesterday it all started. So congratulations on another great edition. Again, you've seen Matt out there a lot since the April 1 release. He was on the couch with Bloom. He's talked a lot of the prospects, and there's no shortage of that out there available.
I've still got my pants here with JJ Zachariason.
Yes. And he did a 2-hour JJ Zachariason. If you know JJ, 2 hours is not the norm for him. A lot to go through. We're going to spin a little bit and put the focus on landing spots and their importance. We're going to start with the quarterback position. And there's teams that have needs. A couple teams have needs for immediate starters. Let's start with those. The Tennessee Titans, Cleveland Browns picked up Kenny Pickett, but that's not the answer there. Those two teams, and they pick early in the draft. Tennessee Titans pick number 1. Cleveland shortly thereafter, number 2. A lot of talk that Cam Ward's going to be the guy. What kind of fit would he be with the Tennessee Titans? And is there another player that you feel might be a better fit for them, given the Brian Callahan coach scheme?
I think that Cam Ward obviously gives you a good combination of upside value and some baseline skills to eventually start sometime during the rookie year. His ability to move around in the pocket and to be able to create with his feet make him an appealing prospect who, for a Tennessee Titans offense that lacks quality line play or proven line play at this stage of the game. And also, you look at the receiving core that they have. He can generate big plays for them and help those receivers be able to realize a lot of that big play ability that they do, for them to possess. And I think that because of his ability as a runner to be able to move in the pocket and also to be a runner on design plays, it helps out Tony Pollard and Tajay Spears, because you're taking one player, at least one player, if not 2 to 3, away from the attention of the running back in the box. So that's a really nice benefit there. You can see how Jalen Milroe might do that even to a greater extent, and have that opportunity to be that type of player. And I would argue that he's a better processor of information in the middle of the field than Cam Ward is. But maybe hasn't, maybe from a standpoint of certain types of throws, Ward might be a little bit better. But those are the two guys that make the most sense for the Titans.
How much should we read into Tommy Rees, the newly appointed offensive coordinator in Cleveland? Milroe had his best season in Alabama when Rees was the OC there. Should we read anything into that connection? How helpful is that for a rookie to have that familiarity with the scheme, or is it going to be Kevin Stefanski's scheme and it really doesn't matter?
Well, I mean, it could be a little bit of both, in the sense that at least he has a familiar face in the building who knows what Milroe does well and what he needs to work on, and that could help translate some things with the Stefanski offense if it's purely Stefanski running the show with this. So there's kind of, there's a little bit of a booster seat that's helpful in that regard. On the other hand, if it is more Reese's offense, then that, I think either way, what it tells you is that if they draft Milroe, that they are putting a infrastructure in place to allow Milroe to do certain things that he does best, kind of like Jaden Daniels getting a chance to do things that he does best to a certain degree, at least in the beginning. That would make it safe plays and then be able to expand outward from there. And I think that that's what they're hoping to do with Milroe if they draft him.
Right. So there are other teams that have needs, maybe less immediate. I know the New York Giants are one of them. Shedeur Sanders, that's how you have them ranked, right? You go Ward, Milroe, Shedeur Sanders. The New York Giants, they would be picking shortly thereafter the Cleveland Browns, immediately thereafter. A lot of talk that they're still open to quarterback. Some other teams, the New York Jets, Los Angeles Rams, New Orleans Saints, Pittsburgh Steelers are all going to have stopgaps, or maybe in the case of the Jets, they'll have a little more with Justin Fields in there as quarterback. But the contract, they're not tied to him for the long term any more than any of these other teams. Los Angeles, a few more years with Matthew Stafford. New Orleans Saints ready to move on from Derek Carr ASAP, just not this year. So any quarterbacks that you see are great fits for those teams, including Shedeur Sanders, like would the Giants be wise to draft him this year?
I mean, honestly, I think that the positive end of this, and I'm going to start with the positive end because I don't believe in the positive end of this. Okay, that's the quick answer is no, they shouldn't. But if we're going to make the argument that for reasons that they should, is that they gave Brian Daboll an extra year because they recognized that Daniel Jones was a bit of a fraud as a first round pick, and that he's been saddled with Daniel Jones and no one to compete with Daniel Jones to take the job away from him during Daboll's tenure. It's kind of like they were like, you're going to have to make it work with Jones. We're not going to give you any outs to be able to get rid of this guy. And so now they're at the end of this and they're not happy. Mara's not happy. He's like, let me give it one more year, because let me give Daboll a chance to at least have a veteran and see what this offense looks like with a veteran. And maybe we draft a youthful player who can sit behind those veterans. And I would look at it this way. Russell Wilson might be the corny grandpa in terms of his leadership style. And Jameis Winston might be a lot of fun as a leader, but as like scouts used to say, he instills the belief to lead a team off a cliff, and he will lead the team off the cliff. So you've got two leadership styles to choose from, and take the best from both and leave the worst out behind it. And you get a proven Super Bowl quarterback in Russell Wilson who can still play in front. And the best thing about NFL teams, don't develop quarterbacks by and large. They teach them scheme. They teach them game plan. And where they get time to acclimate and do the development on their own is when they get to sit behind a veteran and watch how the veteran does all the things that leaders need to do in terms of after they make mistakes, after teammates make mistakes, how to manage a game, how to do, how to handle the media, how to handle practice, how to handle all the things behind the scenes. And they get the bandwidth to be able to work on their games and do that without having to deal with the every week starts. So you get those two guys in front of you, it makes sense to draft a guy now And then whether Dable's there or not, at least he learns some things so that when it's his turn to have to learn an offense, even if it's going to be a new one, he's got some experience. If not, but I would say overall, Shadur Sanders gives you a Geno Smith, Baker Mayfield, Tua Tagovailoa vibe in terms of ceiling, which means he's got to have a lot of talent around him. And it would be nicer if that you could find us an equivalent quarterback next year, and maybe you pick Travis Hunter, and you have Travis Hunter and Malik Neighbors. And if you can't get that quarterback, I bet there's a quarterback in the NFL who might be coming free from his contract who's going to go to the Giants and go, they've got a good defense, they've got a good offensive line, they got a promising running back, and they've got two of the most exciting young receivers in the NFL. I think I could work with that.
Right. And I think a lot of people would be willing to. Anyone in particular's skill set stands out to you for the Pittsburgh Steelers among the rookie class?
I would just say for Arthur Smith, you probably want a guy who can go deep off of play action. And if he has the ability to run the ball, that could be a nice element. But again, with Arthur, we don't know whether Arthur's so glued to his scheme that he just really wants a robot who does exactly what Arthur wants. And if that's the case, then I would say a Hoover vacuum cleaner might not be a bad idea, that they can put some robotics in at Caltech and forget the rest of these quarterbacks. But they don't really need one. They just need something with remote control that he can play with. But I'd say, probably in this case, Jackson Dart doesn't make any sense to me for that.
We've been hearing that name though, right?
Yeah, but he's not a deep ball guy.
Right.
So it just seems counterintuitive to what they just added. Jalen Hurts isn't bad. It's just that I'd say his deep game when I charted it, or it's not Jalen Hurts, Jalen Milroe isn't bad. Freudian slip because they're similar style players. Milroe has a promising deep game, but when I charted it, I didn't have enough of a sample size to really give him the points that he probably deserved, which would have put him number one on my board. Cam Ward's not getting there, so that's not going to happen. Shador can throw the deep game, and I think Shador would be fine for them and probably one of the safer plays just because he's seen a lot with his dad, whether that's traumatic or whether that's positive. I'm not sure. I'm going to say that it was a positive overall. And at worst case scenario, it might be a little traumatic, and then he gets his head straight and tells his dad, that he needs to feel what he is, or he can say what Bob says on our show on Monday mornings a lot. Or is it me? I don't know, but both of us. So I think that Shador, again, for the Steelers who could compete now, he might be the safest, but he has the most limited upside. Milroe probably has the highest upside. Cam's not getting there. Dart is a puzzling pick for me unless they feel like they have the formula to make him a good vertical thrower. If they do, he could be an excellent option, but that's a boom bust thing.
Yeah, part of that is the price they have to invest in him, and it's probably going to be a little cheaper than those other higher end players. We'll move to the running backs. Teams that do have pressing needs right now. The Las Vegas Raiders picking 6 overall. Very exciting team there. Chicago Bears, a lot of talk that DeAndre Swift is on his way out there. Maybe a trade possible. Dallas Cowboys, they signed Javonte Williams and Miles Sanders. Don't know that they're done. The Raiders have been, a lot of speculation or outright rooting from the local media that Ashton Genty lands there, the Boise State guy who is phenomenal. I think he's this year's generational talent. Is that a good landing spot for him? And who else fits in those landing spots, the Bears and Cowboys?
I think it'd be good for Ashton Genty to be a Raider in the sense that Pete Carroll's going to be in charge of, overseeing that offense to some extent. And they want to probably have a strong run game. That's what he's always been about. Yep. He had a very dynamic runner at USC by the name of Reggie Bush. And I would say that Genty I didn't compare him directly with Reggie Bush, but there's some characteristics that are very similar in terms of the height, weight, build, the run stamina that those both guys had early in their careers. I think that he could be an exciting addition, considering that also off of play action with Genty, that helps Brock Bowers. So, they could use some wide receiver talent too, but this wide receiver class probably is good enough for them to pick from there and get a dynamic, outside receiver who can be really the number 2 or number 3 in that offense, with Brock Bowers being the number 1. So I like that, and I think that they also have enough support with running backs that are existing that while fantasy GMs may not love them, they're still good enough that Ginty can be an exciting part of a tandem if they need to use him as such. Dallas, I mean, I just laugh because I look at the 2 that they picked, and I think maybe, I don't know if the veteran minimums would have made Nick Chubb and J.K. Dobbins more expensive, but I think that they could have gotten both of those guys and might have benefited with one of them being a load carrier, and then they could have picked the third guy. But Jerry Jones also just bought the farm or sold the farm for Joe Milton, who I would say scouts mostly that I knew would say the New England Patriots did great to get out from under him as fast as possible, considering that he's got that. The next best thing to people getting over their skis on speed is a big arm. And so, Joe Milton with the size and the arm, but his processing ability has never been all that great. And he takes a lot of hits, plays a lot of hero ball. And while it looked good early, we've seen a lot of quarterbacks who look good early, who suddenly you look at them and they look like hot trash, after defenses adjust. And so to get essentially to drive the car off the lot and then to come as my buddy Matt St. Jean said in the Patriots podcast with me last night, to drive the car off the lot last year and then to bring it back to the lot and get the same amount of money you paid for it, just deferred to another year, still not so bad. And Jerry Jones, I mean, I would just say he's playing fantasy football and he's reacting like some newbie fantasy football guys.
Give me 3 names that aren't Ginty as who could be immediately come in and be quality NFL starters if they are available.
Oh, there's a lot of guys available, certainly. So I mean, I think Quinshon Judkins could be one of those guys easily. Damian Martinez could come in and start right away. If you're looking for somebody with a little bit more quickness into their game and some receiving aspects that could be promising, late round pick Taj Brooks certainly is in that mix for me. Trevion Henderson could be a week 1, co-starter in a DeAndre Swift role, who might be a little better between the tackles than what you're looking for from Swift. Dylan Sampson would be a surprise in that area of that range too.
Omarion Hampton has been a name that seems to be gaining some traction. Should it be?
I think he is more than good enough to be the B back and maybe sometime A back in an offense. But his speed and size have gotten a little bit to the point where the buzz is getting to be overkill, because it takes him a while to get up to that top speed. His pass protection has weak points that are going to bite him more often than they are in college. Like, his pass protection rate looks good, but I remember Dante Foreman had a great pass protection rate, and
yes.
he was not very good. And I graded him that, because when you actually grade by technique and skill set and project it to what the NFL does, like, oh, this guy drops his head, I'm glad he got in this defensive tackle's way, but he's not going to be facing a defensive tackle who doesn't know what to do with his hands in the NFL. They're going to just swim right over him, bull rush him, put him aside. They're going to do a lot of things that are going to be very damaging to a quarterback if Omarion Hampton keeps doing this stuff. And Omarion Hampton's fumble rate is a little bit on the lower side than what you'd like to see. It's not below the threshold that I value, but those 3 things in itself, you look at him and go, to be the number 2 back in the draft, there's a little problem with that. I'd say, though, if wherever they draft him, if they're happy with the low end expectation that he'll be a B back that they can't rely on as much on passing downs as they thought, but he can give him 2 down work right now and maybe use him as a receiver away from the backfield if they have to use him in the passing game, he'll be competent at the very least.
I know the local folks in Las Vegas. I do some radio there. Would love to see Ginty. I threw something out at you earlier today, the possibility that the Giants might go Ginty, and I think that's something to watch for. If the quarterback class is not all that great and you have a former Super Bowl winner, and another guy who will throw at anything named Malik Neighbors as often as he can. I don't know. Might be a good play. We'll see how it goes. A quick reminder for everyone, after the NFL Draft Football Guys daily email update will crank up again every day. Me, Cecil Lammy, Sigmund Bloom, providing the updates and getting you all the essential news and analysis. Be ready for that. If you haven't signed up, go to the footballguys.com website and get that. And don't miss Sigmund Bloom's pre and post draft Bloom 100s will be floating around out there as well, offering comprehensive rookie rankings and that little Bloom magic. And we'll see who he blooms this year. Wide receivers, Matt Waldman. Green Bay Packers seem to have, to me, the greatest need for a true alpha receiver. You say the Carolina Panthers are in the mix there as well. Los Angeles Chargers, as much as I love the child prodigy Lad McConkey, and I know you do as well, a nice complimentary piece could maybe, set him free even further. New York Jets maybe have a little bit of a need. They've let a guy go, Devontae Adams, who was pretty good. And the New England Patriots added Stephon Diggs. Is he guaranteed to be ready to go? Do they need more pieces for Drake May to be a successful quarterback? We'll see. Throw me out the top few names on the list and where you think they fit.
Yeah. I think that probably when we take a look at this for wide receivers, Green Bay, I just think it would be a waste of their time to go early on a receiver. They probably do need an alpha, but the problem is that there really isn't a true alpha on this board, who I think gives you the most opportunity, unless you say it's Luther Burden. But I'd say Luther Burden is more of a higher end Jaden Reed on that.
So more whack-a-mole in the forecast for fantasy managers trying to divine which Packers wide receiver is going to turn up any given week.
Yeah, exactly. I think they should hold steady on the receivers they have and focus on other things. But that's just me. If they're going to go late and they want to go for like a true X receiver who can win the ball, maybe they just wait till the end of the draft and pick Isaiah Nayor out of Nebraska, who's 6'4", 218, runs a 4.4 40, and was supposed to be part of a deadly 1-2 combination with Xavier Worthy at Texas before he tore his ACL 2 years ago. When you look at what he does well, he kind of gives you that Nico Collins type of vibe, where he can be that X receiver who can get yards after the catch in the open field, but win a lot at the boundary and give Jordan Love that vertical threat from that standpoint. So maybe someone like him. People are going to also say Jaden Higgins, but I think that there are three receivers who are probably better route runners than Jaden Higgins right now, even if their hands aren't quite as good as what Higgins's are. So, I don't know if you're going to get automatic replacements from this draft class for the Packers out of this receiving core.
Can I just throw out there that, Ted McMillan, I know a lot of people have heard that he's the top of a lot of lists. He's not the top of your list. And I think if anybody's been losing steam, he's that guy. Their player, like Travis Hunter is the big name. You mentioned him earlier. Do you think he'll play more receiver, or do you think this is going to be more of a cornerback with touches of wide receiver?
I think it's so much of an unknown because it depends on the team. It really does. I mean, he's a good enough corner to be a Pro Bowl cornerback. So, from a money standpoint, as Sigmund mentioned in our coach show on the couch last week, if you look at player salaries, that tells you that wide receiver is more valuable than cornerback. But if you also look at who gets drafted in the first round early, I would say it's probably a dead heat between cornerback and wide receiver. So on that end, it depends on what the team needs more of. I mean, if he wound up in Green Bay, I would say they probably need a cornerback more than they need another wide receiver.
Fair point.
They'd use him as as such. Carolina probably need him more as a wide receiver. And then you just wonder whether they're going to gadgetize him and make him a Mecole Hardman plus player who has a lot more ability than Hardman does, but gets a role that's kind of the shaft for what he could really be for fantasy GMs, or he winds up on a team like the Chargers where maybe they go, yeah, we need that speedster who can win anywhere on the outside. And this is going to be great for Justin Herbert. And maybe we'll just use him situationally as a corner if we use him there at all.
All right. So I know, like I said, you're listed. You have both Texas receivers very high, Golden and Bond. Any of these landing spots seem like they'd be suitable for them, or do you see some different teams maybe making great fits for those two?
Golden and Bond would be terrific for the Panthers because they need a speedy wide receiver who can run good routes in the middle of the field, and both of them qualify. And then with Bond, well, actually, both of them, you can use them a little bit in the running game or on the RPO type of game, and still Thielen can be viable. Coker can still be viable complement there. So I think those guys, that's a really good help. Even if you're looking at Xavier Legette and say whether they decide that's a mistake or they want to use him as like a flanker because he's more of a flanker type.
Right.
They could use those, Bond and those other guys from that Bond and Golden in that regard. I think the Chargers is the same thing. I mean, if you want to get run after the catchability or deep passing, Bond would probably be the guy I would prefer, but Golden is still very strong in that respect too. So you can probably get both of those guys. What you get when you have Bond or Golden with Ladd McConkey is you have now two receivers who can work inside, outside, and you can mix and match those guys. And even with Quentin Johnston, you can do that because he'd be a good slot receiver in theory, so that you can move those guys around a lot and have them play all three roles, and that might be really beneficial. The Jets, I mean, look, those guys are more closer to Garrett Wilson anyway. You'd probably want to get a bigger guy. From that standpoint, and Ted McMillan could work for the Jets in this fashion because the best cover corner is going to be playing Garrett Wilson. Now you could put McMillan at the flanker spot. He may not have as much trouble separating from that or in the slot role, and he can get prime looks where he uses his ability to win the ball in the air. The Patriots are literally a slot receiver convention. Whether you want it as a pure slot, a flanker slot, or an X slot, they all have to play slot, it seems like, or that's where their basis of drafting comes from. So you would like to see them go different. Ted McMillan could be a nice look. Kayshon Boutte might still have a role. He continues to work hard, and that was the concern about him, and he's kind of grown into doing some things, and they're going to give Javon Baker, they're going to give the Polk another opportunity. Yeah, other opportunities as well. So, I think that unless they get one of those top 5 guys, they could probably wait a bit. And we'll see, what's going on. But a lot of these players are slot / something. And, we know that all the fans are like, well, we've got Demario Douglas. And then I'm going, yeah. Right. And he's clogging up maybe your best roster spot as a good slot receiver who's not all that highly productive, in the mix. It's kind of funny.
So when you look at that group of guys on these teams, the Xavier Legette, the Cokers, the Polks and Bakers, the Quentin Johnstons, Malachi Corley in New York, are any of these guys like frontline players, or do they have the ability to emerge at some point, or have you seen any signs of it?
I think Baker in theory could, but it's a matter of whether or not he has the character profile of Jermaine Burton,
right?
Which we've learned lately.
Bengals would like a word about
Bengals, that. Yes, they would. So we worry about that. I think Polk could be a nice all-around player, but I think that he was a little bit overrated. Coker, to me, all the guys that you mentioned are not primary guys.
Right.
They're at best maybe the wide receiver 2 or a very productive wide receiver 3 based on what they do well and what's difficult to correct, like Quentin Johnston's hands on certain types of targets. He may never get better at to a high degree, but he's good enough to do damage in the role that I think Harbaugh is going to want him to be in. So this is not the draft where you're going like last year's draft had a lot more guys than who you could say, yeah, plug and play. They can get in here and do some damage and possibly be primary receivers. This one's more about, these are guys that, this class is more about after the first 5 guys, the rest are probably players that you're hoping could become really great wide receiver 3s that have fantasy production or solid wide receiver 2s who occasionally give you a wide receiver 1 season because they got a great player opposite them.
So in this draft, no superstars, no,
I think the closest guy to be that is Luther Burden. Right. And I just think because he can do it all. He can be an X. He can run all those routes and do that stuff. And there may be a few other guys that might fit that, but they don't. It's going to be more complicated. The fit's going to have to matter. Yeah.
Yeah, that's what we're here for, kids. The tight end position, they say it's very deep. I'm focused on a couple guys, but there are some really interesting landing spots. The Indianapolis Colts have been running by committee forever and could use somebody. The Carolina Panthers, again, can't seem to get the right guy in their landing spot. And the Los Angeles Chargers, although they added some guys in free agency, Tyler Conklin, they've kind of been cobbling it together with the Will Disleys and Hayden Hursts of the world. And maybe they have room for a player who would be interesting. A lot of talk that maybe Brock Bowers would be a guy they would be interested in last year. It didn't work out that way. So which of the top tight ends are good fits for these offenses?
I mean, I think Harold Fannin to the Panthers could be kind of interesting because it seems like they tried to do that with Tommy Tremble. And if they've soured already on the Texas tight end from last year, who I don't think they should, Jatavian Sanders. I still think Sanders has some potential there.
He showed flashes.
Yeah, so I think they could wait a little bit with him. Maybe they want to get a bigger tight end who can block, and they can use more 2 tight end sets and do that. So that might be okay for them to wait. But the Colts could go a lot of different directions with this. If they want a downfield guy who can win on routes and be more of a big play option, maybe they wait a bit and go for Elijah Arroyo, who's got the speed to stretch the field, but at the same time, is he a bit of a boom bust player based on his production profiles and what he has to learn? We'll see about that. At the same time, maybe they're going to go for a middle of the road player who can give you a little bit of everything. Thomas Fidone of Nebraska would be an interesting option there. You could probably, if you don't need much of a run blocker, but you're going to be willing to pay the prices if you're getting one. Tyler Warren certainly could be in that mix, but what he can do as a receiver might make up for whatever disappointment they have in the run game.
One of your comps is, of course, Dallas Clark, the great Colts tight end. So and by the way, just for people out there, and go get the rookie scouting portfolio, MattWaldman.com. I demand that you do that. You don't have him at the top of your tight end ranks, as kind of has been most people do. You like Colston Loveland an awful lot, or are there any places he might fit and become an immediate starter?
All 3 of those places would be very good for him. I could see Loveland reuniting with Harbaugh in LA. That would be a great fit. The Colts, I think, would solve a lot of problems, and they could get rid of like 4 of their tight ends. Well, at least 2 of them. 2 of the 4.
Alec Cox is going nowhere. He's like a permanent fixture now.
Yeah, that's okay, and he's the one I wouldn't want going anywhere. So but they can get rid of Kylan Granson. They can get rid of a few of the other guys. And let Colston Loveland be that guy. Mason Taylor might not be bad there either. You're a big fan of him, so am I. And I think that Mason Taylor would be a great get for the Panthers. He'd be a great get for the Colts. And with the Chargers, because they already got Will Disley and some of the bigger dudes, they can let Mason Taylor run routes.
All right, well, we're just shy of 3 weeks of getting the official landing spots for these players, or at least some of them. The draft starts Thursday, April 20. What is it, April 24th this year? Yeah, April 24th, 25th, 26th. We'll have coverage of that at Football Guys. You'll find me on the Sirius XM Fantasy Sports Radio covering all the festivities throughout the course of the draft live. And we'll start putting this on. The draft is, for me, the green flag of fantasy season. I want to see where these players go, put a helmet on them, find a scheme, and figure out what's going to happen. And we will revisit all this with Matt Waldman when that time comes. In the meantime, once again, MattWaldman.com. That's where you go to get the rookie scouting portfolio. I highly recommend it. Get the pre-draft and post-draft editions. Post-draft edition is necessary. People get it. And also go back to Football Guys. Check out the Bloom 100. It's nothing like that as well. The post-draft is fantastic, and plenty of content also available there on the rookies. So check all that out. I'll be back here next Tuesday with more fun stuff to sort through, probably some draft related information. So be ready for that. Thank you, Matt, for coming on the hot seat. We'll do it again soon, probably after the draft, to kind of sort through some of the players we've just talked about and some of the locations and see where the fits really meet the talent.
It's a pleasure as always. And, I'm going to get back to training my UDFA linebacker prospect who's hoping he can land a deal with an AFC North team.
He's a great dog. I love Hugo, and so does everyone else. All right, Matt, thank you very much. We'll see you next week on the hot seat. Find us both on the Twitter and the Blue Sky, at Matt Waldman, at Football Diehard is me. And don't miss out. Plenty of content there as well. So we'll talk to you soon.